Okay, it's 7 o'clock by what my tablet says. So let's call this meeting to order. Let's stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Drano, want to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just take a moment here to think about absorbing all this knowledge tonight and concentrating, and we'll have a good meeting, and hopefully quick. Thank you. Have a seat.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, we did
Mr.
roll
Chairman,
call.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just wanted to note that we have done no roll call for this meeting.
I said we need to do the roll call right now. That's what I said. So roll call, please.
Racky, White, and Robertson, Lund. And there's Brandon right now.
And Supervisor Lund messaged me today, and he's home sick today. So he is excused.
We have 28 present and 2 absent.
Are we compliance with open meetings law?
We are, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I entertain a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Backlund, second by Jekyll. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Approval of the March 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. Supervisor Renard.
I'll move approval of the minutes as presented.
Second by Morris. Any additions, subtractions, anything? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. And we have communications. Any communications, Audrey?
I do not have any.
I do then. Since we have some time tonight and we have several outgoing supervisors that have been, some of them been here for many years, we have a resolution of thank you to them. So I will start. These are from the least experienced to those that have been here older than dirt. So the resolution 2022-01, whereas Jeff Smith served on the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 12 from April 2020 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor Smith served on the Fair Park Committee, Parks Committee, and Solid Waste Committee, and whereas Supervisor Smith was known for his passion in representing the people of Jefferson County and his never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Smith's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now therefore be it resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting the 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Smith and wishes him happiness and good health in the years ahead. Supervisor Smith. Somebody might want to take your picture, Buck.
Here, Steve, action on this one, on these resolutions?
You don't want all of you.
Okay, good.
Whereas Connor Nealon served as Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 27 from June of 2027 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor Nealon served on the Jefferson County Board of Health, Executive Committee, Fair Park Committee, Finance Committee, and University Extension Education Committee, and whereas Supervisor Nealon was known for his passion in representing the people of Jefferson County and never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Nealon's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now therefore be resolved, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Connor Nealon and wish him happiness and good health in the years ahead. Whereas Laura Payne served as Jefferson County Board Supervisor for District 16 from April of 2014 to April of 2022, and Supervisor Payne served on the Administration and Rules Committee, Buildings and Grounds Committee, Highway Committee, Historic Sites Preservation Council, Human Resources Committee, Land and Water Conservation Committee, Parks Committee, Solid Waste and Air Quality Committee, Strategic Planning Committee, and the Wisconsin River Rail Transit Commission. And whereas Supervisor Payne is known for her passion in representing the people of Jefferson County and her never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Payne's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now, therefore, be resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Laura Payne and wishes her happiness and good health in the years ahead. And there is one typo on here, so you'll see it. They refer to you as him instead of her. Whereas Michael Kelly served as the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 2 from April of 2022 to April of 2012 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor Kelly served on the Highway Committee, Infrastructure Committee, Land and Water Conservation Committee, Parks Committee, and University Extension Committee, and whereas Supervisor Kelly was known for his passion representing the people of Jefferson County, his never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Kelly's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Mike Kelly and wishes him happiness and good health in the years ahead. Whereas Dick Scholl served as Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 28 from April of 2010 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor Scholl served on the Board of Health, Highway Committee, Historic Sites Preservation Council, Home Consortium, Human Resources Committee, Infrastructure Committee, Law Enforcement Emergency Management Committee, Solid Waste Committee, and University Extension Education Committee. And whereas Supervisor Schultz was known for his passion representing the people of Jefferson County and his joke telling, and the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Schultz's public service, foresight, and leadership and thoughtfulness, which we will be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved, Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Dick Schultz and wishes him happiness and good health in the years ahead. Whereas Lloyd Zastro serves the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 10 from April of 2008 to April of 2012, and from April of 2016 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor Zastro served on the Fair Park Committee, Highway Committee, Human Resources Committee, Land and Water Conservation Committee, Parks Committee, Planning and Zoning Committee, Solid Waste and Air Quality Committee, and University Extension Education Committee, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And whereas Supervisor Zastro was known for his passion in representing the people of Jefferson County, his never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Zastro's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved, Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this 4th day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Lloyd Zastro and wishes him happiness and good health in the years ahead. Thank you, Lloyd. Whereas Amy Renard served on the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for District 9 from April of 2010 to April of 2022, and Supervisor Renard served on the Administration and Rules Committee, Broadband Working Group, County Administrative Search Committee, Economic Development Consortium, Executive Committee, Farmland Conservation Easement Commission, Finance Committee, Law Enforcement Emergency Management Committee, Planning and Zoning Committee, Strategic Planning Committee, Sustainability Task Force, Utilities Tax Commission, and during her time as County Board Supervisor also held the position of first and second Vice Chair of the County Board. And whereas Supervisor Renard was known for a passion representing the people of Jefferson County and a never-ending desire to learn, whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor Renard's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now therefore be it resolved, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this fourth day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Amy Renard and wishes her happiness and good health in the years ahead. Thank you, Amy. And last but not least, whereas Greg David served on the Jefferson County Board of Supervisor for District 3 from April of 2002 to April of 2022, and whereas Supervisor David served on the Administration and Rules Committee, Building and Grounds Committee, Economic Development Consortium, Highway 26 Advisory Committee, Home Consortium, Human Resources Committee, Infrastructure Committee, Law Enforcement Emergency Management Committee, Parks Committee, Planning and Zoning Committee, Solid Waste Committee, Strategic Planning Committee, Sustainability Task Force, and during his time as County Board Supervisor, also held the position of Second Vice Chair of the County Board. And whereas Supervisor David was known for his passion representing the people of Jefferson County and his never-ending desire to learn, and whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors recognizes Supervisor David's public service, foresight, leadership, and thoughtfulness, which will be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, meeting this fourth day of April 2022, does hereby honor Supervisor Greg David and wishes him the happiness and good health in the years ahead. Thank you, Greg. At this point, we would like to have the county board act on these resolutions. I would entertain a motion for these resolutions. So moved by Supervisor Brogler, second by Supervisor Morris. Any additions, subtractions? Did we miss anything there? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much for your service. Now we have public comment. Any public comment pertaining to the agenda? There is none. Seeing none. Special order of business. Mr. Waymeyer.
So tonight, we requested to have a special meeting as we're towards that next pretty significant phase of the courthouse, jail, sheriff's project to move forward, and it's called the design development phase. And so we thought it was prudent to update the board that's kind of shepherded this for the last 2+ years to look at the final design and our final updated budget, especially in an unchanging time as we look at inflation and other impacts that we'll talk about tonight. At your desk, you're going to see two documents. One is the most updated floor plans. Quite honestly, these are fairly well in line with what we showed you even in January and November. Some small tweaks here and there, but nothing significant. It includes the enhanced or larger law enforcement center that was approved by the county board in January. Also tonight, then you'll also have a section that is this presentation. You'll see some pictures that are not including your handout, so we're saving a little bit of paper, but kind of some modeling so you all can see what those pictures look like from a 3D standpoint. Because I don't know if every county board member has seen the updated renderings of that. And so tonight, we're going to also have our team that's been helping through this, Moss Brothers and Potter Lawson, and they're each going to talk through the various sections of how we've gotten through the phase of design development and where we're at today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about key milestones, talk a little bit about some of the design changes or things that quite frankly drove some of the design changes, regulations, code. And then ultimately, as Moss Brothers are putting together an updated budget, the impacts of inflation and what does that mean to where we're at from a budgetary standpoint right now. So we want to kind of go back and just as a reminder, as we've gone through the last few years of what has taken place. And so previous studies, this was brought up by someone that we should mention tonight. Just talking about in 2005, Venture Architects, as they're known, did a space analysis for all our county facilities. They specifically focused in on the county courthouse and the sheriff and the jail facilities. And there's been some changes definitely since then. And I know in past analysis of that study talked about, like, example, building a whole nother pod for the jail, which I think today we realize we really didn't need. At least at this point in time, which is a good problem to have, right, Sheriff? That we don't have to have another pod. In 2015, we did a full mechanical assessment of all our buildings through a protocol facility dude. And they brought engineers on site to look at all our facilities, outline, identify all our major components, and looking at what was end of life or near end of life or beyond end of life in many cases. And so that was part of how we got to this point. Fourth quarter of 2019, we, based on the guidance of various committees, we issued an RFQ for basically design services to start that first phase, and Potter Lawson was selected, and the county board approved that contract in January of 2020. In May of 2021, after the work of all the various assessment, is when we did the first initial update to the county board. Keep in mind, throughout this process, there's updates to the Buildings and Grounds Committee, in some cases, Executive Committee and Finance Committee throughout the duration of this project as well. Subsequent to that meeting where we gave the update on the initial cost update, July 2021 is when we were authorized to do the next phase of work with Potter Lawson, specifically the more gritty design analysis. And that included more enhanced schematic design, the design development phase, and the next big phase, which is the construction drawings and contract administration. So that's the next big phase, which basically the next big documents the county board will see is actually bids related to this project. In November of 2021, the main schematic design portion was completed. That is when we provided you an update at that board meeting, and Moss Brothers gave an initial analysis or updated budget numbers at that point in time. In January 2022 is when we identified that we still need a little more space over in the jail sheriff's operations, and that's when the addition to the addition, as I like to phrase it, was talked about, including the outdoor space, and was recommended to move forward by the county board. And then on March 31st, most of the building and grounds, they sat through about a 4 to 5 hour session looking at all the page by page of the design development, make sure there's no questions and we were aligned with what the guidance had been. And then obviously tonight, we're looking for one more update to the entire county board with the design development and updated budget estimate. And so with that, we will turn you over to some of the highlights with Ron, the lead architect and project manager from Potter Lawson on this, to kind of talk through some of the main components of what you have in front of you in terms of the plan layout, but then also talking through some of the exterior views and some of the interior views of the more significant parts of the inside. So I'll turn it over to Ron first.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. What we thought we'd do in this first part of the presentation is just kind of give you an update on a lot of the exterior design. Also want to talk to you about the courtroom layouts. We've been working with staff on that, as courtrooms and county boardrooms. Just kind of show you the layouts as we've developed those. On the exterior design, for this image you're seeing here, some of these you've already kind of seen. We're starting to clean these up, get them further along. But for example, this is the courts addition that we're talking about here, in which the actual addition is sitting in this area here. We're keeping a lot of the existing precast on these existing buildings. We're trying to take the building materials for these additions, really kind of tie them into your existing building. So that combination of the brick that you have out there and the precast that you have out there, again, trying to tie that all together. So I think you'll kind of see that as we move forward. Which one am I looking at? There we go. This is at the Law Enforcement Center addition. One of the things here, and just to let everybody know here at this meeting, we did meet with the city. We did get the variance approved for the setback requirement. That was not an issue at all with them. So we're okay and clear with this addition to be cited as we've been showing in our documents. But again, the addition here is pretty much in this zone right here, tying in with the existing language of the existing precast. What we've been able to do is go back to staff, talk to them about window placement. There's a lot of special types of spaces in the Law Enforcement Center addition. So for example, you have emergency management down below with their offices. We've kind of played off the same language of punched windows that you see on the other parts of the building, same kind of detailing. However, on this ground floor in this area here, after working with emergency management, that's our emergency management operations room. No windows. They did not want any windows. They've got a lot of large monitors up on the wall. They didn't want any daylight coming into those spaces. And also then adjacent to that is the locker room area. Again, so we've kind of worked through that window placement and everything. Up above, you're seeing where the dispatch center is here. We wanted to strategically locate some windows. They wanted some daylight coming into that space, but they wanted them up higher. It's more like a clear story. And they do also have monitors on the wall. So we looked at where glare would be coming in from the windows and tried to minimize or identify strategic locations for windows. So we've kind of taken it to that next level on this plan. And then over on the second floor up above here, that's just a real clean set of ribbon windows. That's the patrol offices, the patrol room, all that space. It was nice to get some daylight into some of those office areas. The other component here on the rooftop, which is the metal panel screen that you're seeing right up here, if you recall from our previous studies, with the update of the mechanical systems, there is required to have some rooftop units. We've got an air handling unit up there, 2 chillers, and the emergency generator, all on that rooftop. That was the most cost-effective way to get that to work on the roof versus trying to set it on the existing roof structure and trying to strengthen that existing roof structure. So it seemed to make a lot of sense to put it there. And then all we simply did was play it in with the volume of this existing building here with that height, kind of wrapped it around. So it kind of feels like it's not another protrusion up even higher than the existing building. All kind of wraps in and around together. And then the last piece here, this is the addition on the northeast addition. Right now, the existing building sits in this area here. And I was really just kind of playing off that same language with the vertical brick piers marching along. We got a little playful with it with different widths and things like that. Try to modernize it a little bit more, I'll say a little more contemporary, just kind of today, you know, kind of playing with what you might see in a building built today. But again, the whole idea is that all tries to tie in together with the existing building. So that, again, all 3 additions, very considerate of existing materials and existing language on the different existing buildings, trying to tie into that, but kind of giving a little more of a contemporary twist to it. Here's just a couple of overall aerial views of that, just to kind of see the complex existing building sits all through this area here. You can see the northeast addition, the administrative wing addition here. Whoops, sorry. Off on this side, you can see where the courts addition is, and then the law enforcement center addition there. And there's just another view of it here. So again, that is the northeast addition, the courts addition tucked in here, and the law enforcement center addition at that area. A couple of the other spaces we looked at more closely, and I'm going to start with the county boardroom. That's this room here. One of the things that was very clear from staff as we started the programming on this space, they wanted to make sure it was a flexible space, could be used more than just once a month for the board meetings. So the intention here, I'm actually going to go, I think, to the next overall image here. So the intention here at the overall layout, just to orient you, that set of doors right there, or right behind me here, the platform now sits in this location right here. Couple things. We wanted to reorient the space to make it more flexible. I'll go through that in a minute. We also have to make the space ADA compliant. Right now, the platform is not ADA compliant. You have to have some sort of ramp to get up to that level to make it ADA compliant. So the discussion was, if we reorient the room and put the head wall at this north end over here, we'd introduce another wall about 4 feet off the face of that existing wall, and we would tuck the ramp up behind that to get up to the platform at this location. Therefore, meeting the ADA requirement to get up to 14 inches to that area, it's tucked away, it's hidden behind. But the other driving force here is that flexibility. And so what we're proposing is 2 operable walls, one that comes across here, and I think you can see that in the plan. There's an operable wall that comes across here and here, so that in non-county boardroom times, you've basically got 3 conference spaces that can be used on a daily basis for staff. So basically a partition right through there, and another one going there. So you'd have 1, 2, and then all the fixed seating is in this 2/3 of the space to create 3 different conference areas. Again, very flexible, and it meets one of the needs that staff had always talked about, needing more conference space within this area. At the front, or the head wall here, you can see we're showing a position for 6 stations up at the head, county board chair in the center. Ben's actually up in this area, his position here. I don't want to go through it all. Corp counsel, court reporter, and county clerk. This also works well for different staff committee meetings in this area, having the 6 seats up front. That was talked about a fair amount. So again, trying to get that flexibility in this space so it gets used more on a daily basis versus once a month. Other component here, we've talked to technology. Just so you know, our design engineers, the technology team, we met with, man, I think we had over 30 hours of meetings with all the departments combined, talking through their technology needs. That's all been vetted out in that latest set of drawings. But you'll see here the introduction of a couple monitors at the head wall, plus a couple monitors at this location and this location. You can't quite see that one there, but they can be on arms, swing out, so that everybody has a very good vantage point to the monitors and presentations that are going on. And then in the back of the house, as opposed to the gallery kind of sitting randomly throughout like that, the whole idea is once these walls open out, you can take some of the tables in those conference areas, reorganize them across the front. Staff can sit here, press can sit at this location, creates a nice little buffer, and then take the chairs that are in that area for the conferencing and use that for the general public seating. So now the general public is seated at this location here. Your representatives are all up here. And then, of course, we've met the means of requirements for exiting and things like that. So a lot of that's been worked through at the boardroom. I think that's been the direction that the Building and Grounds Committee has been comfortable with moving forward with this room. So that's one of the new updates. The other thing I just want to talk to you about a little bit here is the courtrooms and the designs of the courtrooms. Number one driving force for renovation of the courtrooms is they do not meet ADA right now at all. And it's something in any sort of remodeling project with courts facilities we're going to be required to bring up to meet the Supreme Court guidelines for courts facilities. So this first image that you're seeing here, this is the ceremonial courtroom. This is on the first floor, the far courtroom. The current courtroom sits right about in this area here. This is the courtroom that we are expanding back further in this back area along here. From an ADA standpoint, we're renovating the whole jury box so that the first row sits at the elevation of the well of the courtroom with two chairs, chair here and chair here that can be pulled, quick release, can be removed, meets our ADA requirement, wheelchairs can be brought in. The second tier in the back is up one step, 6 inches, therefore making that ADA compliant. We've got the clearances to all work with that. The other component, your witness stands right now do not meet ADA. So the intent here is we've been working with the district courts. We're allowed to introduce a temporary ramp that can come up into this area and the witness sits in this location. The organization of the courtroom is also a little different in these courtrooms, whereas the witness is not sitting right next to the judge, but sitting close proximity to the judge, but the jury then has a very good view of the witness, and the judges seem to be really on board with that. As a matter of fact, that was one of the judges' requests. The district, or the Chief Justice was really interested in seeing this option laid out. So that's kind of the direction we've taken there. The well of the courtroom has gotten a little bit deeper. We had to move the rail back about 3 feet in order to get the ADA requirements to work and also get proper clearance for bringing in inmates and things like that. So all that's been vetted out. We even went to the point in the courtrooms of setting up cameras at different locations so that we could view from that certain height, pan the room so that we could make sure the judges were comfortable with how much of the witness they could see, or if they're getting to see enough of the front of the face or the side of the face. So all that's been kind of vetted through at this point. The gallery seating in this courtroom, we've expanded up to 60 to 65 people, which is much larger than the current courtroom is, which sits closer to 30 to 40 people. So this one wanted to be expanded a little bit more in that regard. We're trying to use as much of the existing seating as possible, wherever possible. But you can see here, one of the things we've done is that front row, and we're just showing a few chairs there. The intent there is to create flexible space. So those are ganged chairs that come together. What that allows us to do, there's ADA requirements, again, for wheelchair seating. We have to have at least 4 chairs, a space for 4 chairs, and an adjacent seat to that for up to four people once we get above 50 people. So the idea of having flexible furniture there allows us that accommodation. The other thing from a security standpoint is when inmates are brought in here into the courtroom, if it's a potential volatile case or anything like that, they do have the ability to remove some of these chairs and get the public back further from that inmate coming in. So again, just a security measure, as well as here on this courtroom, because of the proximity of the door, introducing a plexiglass screen there, just again, a buffer. So security's been taken into consideration quite a bit, you know, where the bailiffs sit and all that. Technologies, we've had our technology meetings here, and we've met ADA requirements for the ceremonial courtroom. This is just another view of that space. Again, the whole discussion there is how papers pass between the clerks, sight lines between people, all that's been studied and kind of assessed at this point. I want to go to the overall here. The other 3 courtrooms are fairly similar layouts. They're corner benches. Right now, again, none of the benches meet ADA, none of the jury boxes. So we're using the same jury box design at this location. The judge's bench is in the corner, 20 inches up. Right now, unfortunately, you're about 22 inches up with 3 stairs. That doesn't meet code. You're only allowed a 7-inch riser. We're over that. So we have to kind of rework that a little bit to make sure on the back side. The other thing with the Supreme Court guidelines is the judge, the guidelines recommend that the judge enters the courtroom at their elevation. In other words, they're not walking into a door here and ramping up to that spot. So behind the scenes, back behind here, we've got a series of ramps. In one location, we got a lift to get that judge up to that elevation. So that judge enters the courtroom right behind them off a door here into their spot. Again, it's a good security measure too when that egress is right behind that judge, so that in case of an emergency, they're out that door. It's a simple swipe with their card access. The door locks behind them. They're good to go. We've also organized the space so that as the public exits the building, they do not have to use these back doors, this door here and this door here. That's all back behind the secured area. Public can only come out towards the front of the building. So we can keep these as card access doors at these locations. It's a good security measure for really keeping the public out in the case of an emergency. Again, same concept with the seating out here. And these courtrooms are getting between 40 to 45 seats, which has been fine with the judges are all on board with that. The idea being that this also can be a very flexible row of seating here. They can add or take away chairs as need be, depending on people with accessibility needs. And again, then the last group, I'm just going to kind of jump to this, your hearing rooms. Right now, your hearing rooms are very undersized. They're about 700 square feet or so. Supreme Court guidelines recommends 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. So we've upgraded the size of those hearing rooms to meet those guidelines. We've also worked it out with the location in the floor plans, if you recall, so that now your staff enters those hearing rooms from one side without going through the public corridors. Public enters from one side of the room, staff enters another side. Your staff is no longer mingling with the public. Hearing rooms can tend to be very volatile and very vocal. You know, family court, issues like that can get very intense in those courtrooms. So the idea of improving security there was very important to your staff. So for example, in this layout, your public is entering off the hallway out here on this side, coming in to the gallery seating. Your staff is entering through these 2 doors off a secured corridor in the back. It's very important to the staff to do that. Again, the court commissioner sitting in the center of the space is entering through a door at the elevation, taking that seat at that location. There's a clerk station. Now, clerks, typically 5 to 10% of the cases, they're involved in this, but they would be sitting at this location at that same platform level as the court commissioner, and then the witness stand off to the side. In all the courtrooms and hearing rooms, flexibility out in the well, up to 4 tables. We will have power and data, new locations in the floor to accommodate that flexible desking arrangements. Same concept out in front in regard to that front row being flexible seating and how they want to handle that. So that's kind of a real quick run through some of the special spaces, we're calling them, as far as how the design has been moving forward. And again, we have met with our technology consultants in all those spaces as far as bringing that up, because that's a very important component throughout the design process. I'm not sure, Ben, how we want to go through this next.
So this is going to be, the initial parts can probably mainly be Anthony, and then we're a couple, these items I want Ron to comment on too. So really what we try to do on your sheets that are attached is we've looked at some of the things that were more significant cost drivers beyond inflation, which we'll get to, since November of 2021. And so you'll see a couple slides how we got to that point and what were some of the items. And so obviously one of the biggest ones that are out the bat was related to the law enforcement center. So with that being said, I'm going to let Anthony take this and kind of walk through the next couple slides, and then Ron will comment as well.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so we broke these down into some headings. Some of these drivers, as Ron and his team have met with agencies and staff here continuing from November. Department of Corrections was a big one. There's a couple of large items there. One being the miscellaneous security upgrades and site work for the outdoor space next to LEC edition. You know, that's a pretty large dollar amount there, for $300,000. security ceiling upgrades. That is metal security ceilings, which are very expensive. They're asking that some of the existing plaster ceilings be switched out to metal security ceilings. Ron and his staff are working with the Department of Corrections to hopefully maybe back some of that down, and maybe allow us to either use a lower grade of the security ceiling or existing plaster ceilings. So again, these are, I'll call them negotiations still ongoing with the Department of Corrections.
Yes, so on that item, we actually have a meeting on Thursday with the Department of Corrections. And we want to make sure that the security of the law enforcement center still meets the standards for the state, right? It's very important for the safety, not only of the staff, but of the inmates. But there is some leeway there with how we address the existing ceilings in some of those areas are plaster ceilings. They're not very accessible, which is a good thing from a security standpoint, but they're considered level 3. They're requesting that we bump that up to a level 2. However, I think there is some flexibility with them that this has been working, does work in a lot of other county facilities, that maybe we can keep a lot of those areas as a level 3 ceiling, which could significantly bring that $320,000 number down. So we'll be working with them on Thursday.
Thanks, Ron. Another item there would be an additional safety cell that they requested. Next heading would be ADA accessibility. A lot of the existing door handles in this building, door hardware in this building does not meet current ADA requirements, so there's a dollar amount attached to that. An additional judge courtroom chair was requested, I believe, by one.
Yeah, okay. So we're just keep bouncing around. So yeah, I think one of the things we're looking at that one, and I've got to call in actually to the district courts. From an ADA standpoint right now, if 3 of the courtrooms meet all the ADA requirements, in other words, the judge, the lift is for a judge, back house, one of the courtrooms for the judge to come up. If we can get the other 3 fully ADA accessible, and we have the ability in the future to create the space and get the power in the correct location for a future lift, there's a good chance that we would be allowed to not have to install that lift at this point, as long as power and space is available to introduce that lift at a future date or as on an ad-need basis. For example, if a judge comes in, that's their courtroom, they need that accessibility to go up. So that could be something that we'll work through the department or the district courts with.
And Mark and Anthony, can you touch a little bit more on the doors? How many we're actually reusing with what's being proposed versus buying all new? And then can you talk, I put the grills on there a little bit, but can you kind of talk through something we have to do with a lot of the doors versus replacing them, but to help with some code compliance?
So as far as the doorknobs go, that's not code compliant. That would have to switch to a lever lock set as part of a level 3 remodel. Detention wise, I believe 24 doors are getting reused, and there's going to be 25 new. So there is some reuse going on with what you currently have.
A couple of things also with the door is, I think that one's closed over there. You can see wherever you have that traditional knob, like on that door over there, that is not ADA compliant, right? The grasp thing doesn't work. You really have to have a lever at those doors. So all the doors we're replacing, of course, will have all the ADA required hardware. Doors that are remaining by code, level 2 or 3, we actually have to bring that up to code. The other component that you're seeing in some of those doors to remain, and I think that one might have an example, there's a small grill in the base of that door, and you'll see that, there you go, and you'll see that on a lot of doors throughout. What that is back in the day when this building was built, you were allowed to use your corridors as a return air plenum. You are not allowed to do that per code now. You have to have a ducted air return back. I mean, you think about if there's a fire in your building and you're allowed, when everybody's trying to get out through the corridors, and now you're using that as your return air plenum where smoke is going to be coming out of these rooms into that corridor, that is an issue from a code standpoint, right? All the people in the building right in the smoke areas. So what we have to do on the doors remaining is we're going to simply put a plate over that grill, close that off, as opposed to purchasing new doors. The vast majority of these doors are in the back of the house. They're not out in the public areas. So we felt like that was a much more cost-effective solution to cover those grills up and meet that code requirement, as opposed to replacing and spending a few $1,000s per door. That was a much more cost-effective solution.
And also, there were a couple of requests on the security end of things, one for plexiglass in one courtroom and another to enhance the service counter at the clerk of court. DNR requirements for stormwater management would be requiring us to put a filter for the parking lot, a stormwater filter for the parking lot across the street where the existing MIS building is. If you guys recall, that building would be demolished and turned into a parking lot under this plan. Some other building changes that drove some of the budget here was additional drywall to cover CMU at primarily the exterior of the building and some of the existing CMU walls. Again, that's going to provide a little bit more flexibility as far as providing electrical and other stuff within that wall. Additional roof structural reinforcement for the air handling unit would be $50,000. Again, as we've gotten further into this design, the engineers looking at the HVAC systems, there's some areas where, frankly, we can't take the old equipment out and get the old equipment or new equipment in effectively. So some of the new equipment will have to go on the roof, and this is providing reinforcement, structural reinforcement at the roof for that equipment. There are some credits we found, fortunately, changing out the shredder system at the jail. And the shredder system was essentially, the idea there was to capture large chunks, debris that are in the sanitary system that inmates may flush down the toilets and shred them before they get out to the city service. Unfortunately, there's not a feasible way to do that in this existing building without incurring very high cost to do so. So we've come up with an alternative to provide like a hook system at each unit where if there's something that's caught in there, it can be extracted from the pipe without a shredder system.
And I think the other part was the practicality because the shredder is still at the end. So folks would still take their outfits, their bed sheets, and they'd still get into the system, and the teams would still have to get in there and pull that stuff out before we get to the shredder. So it's kind of like you're spending all that money on a shredder, but we're not really solving the problem that the jail staff and maintenance staff were looking to solve with doing that. So really simply, it's a hook that goes out in all the cleanouts. A pretty cost-effective way to do it and a really simple way to do it. So
there was a removal of a mezzanine that was shown in the garage. The purpose of that mezzanine was essentially for additional storage space. And upon looking at the rest of the building and meeting with staff, they've determined that they can do without that storage space. So we thought that was a good item to reduce from the job. Removal of window louvers on the exterior. That is basically aesthetic. It was an aesthetic dressing up of the exterior of the building that
We found a more cost-effective way to kind of get the same aesthetic and look on the exterior around some of the windows. It's say 25 grand.
So not everything was listed on these two panels. I guess I would say that the big ones were hit here, the $900,000 from the meeting in January that we discussed for the addition to the LEC, and then some of these are other larger items. There's probably some additional costs, frankly, hidden within the mechanical, electrical systems that as the engineers have gotten into it, the scope has changed a little bit on that as they get into more detail. And then I don't know if you want to touch on your design practice.
I want to talk about this one because I think this is some of those hidden costs that as we've worked through the design of the project that we wanted to minimize. When trying to bring a building and an existing building like this up to code, there can be a lot of challenges to make that work. And there's a lot of ways around it, but we really looked as we developed the design to really take the cost in mind moving forward. I'd just like to go through a couple examples. Number one, this large complex, it's a big complex, there's an existing firewall, splits pretty much halfway down. It's a 4-hour firewall separation. That means we can treat this large facility basically as two facilities. That's very important as we move forward with establishing allowable structural type, what has to be fireproof, what doesn't. So taking advantage of that wall was very important. And we looked at several scenarios if we use that wall or if we didn't use that wall. But a more cost-effective measure was to use that wall. And what I mean by that, the law enforcement center is considered what we call 2A construction type. Fire rated 1 hour, sprinklered, works great. Let's keep that as is, save money. The other component, though, as we looked at the courthouse side, that's where it gets a little more difficult. You got what's called 2B construction, which is non-combustible, but also is not fireproofed. So there's certain allowable floor areas that we're allowed to go up to and things like that. I don't want to get into all that scenario tonight. What it basically meant was there's certain scenarios where we would have to come back and fireproof the entire structure. All the floors, all the columns going down. We did not want to do that. So working with code officials, we found ways, whether they were exceptions in the code or just analyzing the existing building structure more thoroughly, we were able to, our goal was not to have to fireproof this building. We're talking 6 digits multiple times to fireproof. So we didn't want to go there. What that meant, from a use standpoint, we even went to the point of trying to work this building out as what's called a non-separated use. There are what we call assembly spaces. By code, those spaces have to be separated by a 1-hour fire separation. This room is one of those. It's an assembly space. It's by code. What that would mean is if we couldn't work some of the parameters out as far as allowable areas, we would have to take down these walls and or rate these walls. We would have to spray underneath the floor of this whole section of building and any of the structure leading all the way down to the foundation. We didn't want to go there again. We wanted to save money. Was there ways to get around that? So in working with staff, the biggest parameter is you take your largest footprint or the footprint of that floor, you identify which spaces are assembly spaces. The courtrooms are considered assembly based. There's definitions for what designates assembly. The courtrooms, the 2 hearing rooms that are going on the lower floors, I'll say, and then any other space that's used for like conferencing that's over 750 square feet. So what we made, and you're only allowed to have, once you're over 10%, it's got to be considered an actual substantial use to that floor. If you stay under 10% of that floor area, you can call that accessory use. You don't have to rate those structures. So as we were working with staff, defining the size of jury assembly spaces, we've got one jury assembly room, it's 745 square feet, right? That's a game you play. You don't call it assembly, you call that business. You don't have to rate that space. It's basically still doing the same function, but we can, and that's all allowed by code. It's very clear in the code what we can and can't do with that. But that kept us, right now we have one floor at 9.2% of assembly space, the other one's at 8.5%, right? We're under the 10%. We don't have to rate those spaces. So again, we've been doing all this kind of work on the planning as we've developed those floor plans that you've got in front of you to make sure that we don't have to rate the structure. The biggest thing that was decided from day one was sprinklering this side of the building. Without doing that, we would have to fire separate a lot of things. The additions, we'd have to introduce fire shutters. Again, tens of thousands of dollars for those fire shutters. We don't have to do that. We can keep a nice open floor plan at those additions because we're meeting that allowable area. So again, those code issues, that's been worked on from day one as we developed this design to try to be cost effective as we move forward with the design. Yes?
Just point out that we shrunk that room was shrunk to meet the.
Yes, that was,
We shrunk one of those rooms so that we could not have to do it. So
yeah.
we just looked at the size and we made it, what, 150
We took off
square
like
feet?
we took off like about 100 square, not quite 100 square feet. It was that close, but we're like going, you literally move a wall 1.5 feet, you meet the code requirement. Some of those things that we had to develop as we worked through this planning stage of that project. Again, trying to keep the assembly spaces as accessory use. So those are just some of the criteria. The code limit.
And then the last bullet point on here is obviously the big one is inflation. We'll talk about that a little bit more in these next slides. Wanted to have this sheet as a reminder and kind of shows you, gives you a little scale on where we've come and where we started. August of 2020, we started with essentially three plan sheets and some MEP information, and that was our very initial budget. I don't think we presented that to the full board, but I think the building committee saw that initial budget. And then fast forward to November of 2021, those 3 sheets turned into 21 sheets and some schematic narrative as far as MEP systems go. And from November 21 to now, we are at 384 plan sheets. And Mark brought that for a visual aid. So Yeah, so it gives you an idea. Ron and his team at Power Lawson have been busy at work, and obviously we are getting inundated with much more information than we had even 5 months ago. Again, we talked a little bit about the interactions with DOC, ICE, DNR, and some other agencies also driving some of these changes, and then obviously meetings with the staff as well. So moving back to inflation, this is an index developed by a national contractor. They actually have an office in Milwaukee, but we do keep an eye on it. It gives you a pretty good idea. There's a lot of information out there if you Google construction inflation. I don't know if you'd want to do that or not, but long story short is, in the basically 2021, they're saying that inflation was running about 21.5% nationally, and in the Milwaukee market about 23.2. And I would say, from what we've seen in our other projects, that's probably pretty accurate. So as you can see, it's pretty significant. Here's another one showing material pricing changes, quarter of 2019 to quarter 4 of 2021. So obviously materials driving a lot of the increases, but also demand on the demand end. There is a lot of money out there, a lot of public and private entities looking to spend money in construction, and it is eating up a lot of the capacity in our industry. So this is, you might recognize this from the last time we presented, I believe in, is it November of 21, and that would be the right column. The previous budget reflects what we showed at that point in time. As you go down, last time, if you recall, I gave some scenarios for inflation of 3%, 6%, and 9% coming to May of 2022, which would be obviously this next month here. And I would say from what we've seen, we're all of that 9, maybe even a tad higher. Looking back to that 9% scenario, let's see if I can point it out, is almost $40 million. As we sit right now, snapshot in time, from everything we've talked about, we're at about just under 42.5. So those changes we talked about earlier, the added LEC addition and some of these other changes, we're estimating it was probably about $2 million worth of work. So that other, $2.5 million work. So the rest of that we're thinking was probably inflation that is built in there from the 5 months ago that we talked. Yeah, one thing to point out is last time we carried 10% contingency, which is $2.75 million. As the budget has gone up, we have kept the contingency at 10%. So in this budget, as it sits right now, we have just under $3.3 million in contingency. So there is some safety factor built in here. But that being said, we also updated the inflation scenarios in this column as well currently to reflect what might happen between now and August, which is now the date that we're targeting for bidding out. So we don't anticipate inflation is going to stop. Hopefully it would slow down between now and then. But again, I wanted to present some of those scenarios again so you can see the potential impact of that.
Just a couple notes. If I recall right, when we updated this budget too, this number included almost like another 7 to 8% inflation increase on top of the initial schematic design one. So if you add 9 plus 8, we're almost hitting that 20%. So that's what we're seeing. The orange, I just as a highlight. So right in here on these two lines, we did not change these for apples to apples comparison. But if you may recall, with the budget amendment in March, we reserved about $2.6 million in cash for purposes of covering these two items and these below here. If you add them up, it's not quite 2.6 because we think we probably need to plus these two items up potentially with cash. So understand we have that. So on the right is kind of the updated pledged budget from money available side. So we have up to, and I'm not saying we're taking it all, the $36 million bonding authority. We've bonded for $8 million so far. We are discussing when is that next round to take place this year based on construction schedules, draws, and monitoring what's going on with the Fed. Obviously, they're looking to be a little more aggressive going forward, so we're trying to look at how that affects muni bond rates. American Rescue Plan Act, the board has allocated $7 million towards this project so far. Obviously, there's some other dollars that have been pledged for other things that we can continue to monitor, but $7 million has been allocated towards that. And then that budget carryover we did this last year is $2.635 million. So roughly about $45.635 million all in has been pledged towards this project so far, as needed from the cash side. Obviously, the goal is from this side, it's below it. So since this is probably the biggest one, I guess we have one more slide, which is the next steps, but any initial questions on what you heard from design to budget estimates for anyone up here?
Clarify the comment on sprinklers.
Yes.
Could you just clarify what you said about sprinklers?
Okay. So right now, again, this is split into two buildings like we talked about. The law enforcement center side is sprinklered. This side is not. One of the drivers that allows us to do what we're trying to do with this side of the building and bring it up to code, because this is, on this side is considered a level 3 remodeling project, extensive remodeling, is we are proposing to sprinkler this side of the building. The code is very clear that there's a lot of advantages once you determine to sprinkler a building. That's a very smart move for the county long term. With all, if you didn't sprinkler this side of the building, the cost would be much greater on this side in order to make it code compliant. So it was a very important move to sprinkler this side of the building.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, if I could, you had mentioned, I want to refer to this here room, that can be divided into 2 or 3 spaces or a single space, but when it's divided, I think you described that as several meeting rooms, and there'll be partitions. How do they achieve sound control when you have adjacent meetings so that conversation doesn't bleed over? To the
Right,
other
that's a good question. We call them operable walls. They're about 3 inches thick. They have an STC rating, 50 to 55, almost the same, pretty much the same as a standard wall. We build a soffit-in, insulated. They also have drop-down thresholds to seal off. So acoustically, they seal pretty well.
Other questions? Donna?
Yeah, in looking at the new layout for this room, it seems like all of these people are now going to be squished over into this, and I was wondering, and then you're building out from this wall. So it's like gathering all these people and kind of squeezing them into a different space, and I'm just wondering how that's going to work. Will everybody have the same width of desk?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually came in and measured the widths of all these stations, and everybody's getting that exact same width. It's going to be, as opposed to 3 rows, it will be 4 rows. Hence, that's the reason we're introducing a monitor on that wall and this wall here, because you will be a little further away from the front of the room. But yes, we've made sure that all 32 stations are the same size as you currently have, as well as the spacing between is identical to the spacing here that you've got.
Other questions?
Okay, so heading where we're at tonight, our next big step contractually is move forward with what's called construction drawing bid documents. So that pile that Mark showed you, that's probably about what they typically call is 20 to 25% of construction drawings. But there's a lot more detail for those who are in the trades and have that experience of what needs to take place still. Those are needed for good bids. Mark, Anthony, and the rest of their team have been reaching out to vendors in the area, trying to get the best market data based on what we have today. They will tell you, among the trades, the swings in some areas are pretty significant. And until we actually bid it out, we won't know. So these are the best guess based on those data points coming in. So the next big step is really getting a construction drawing. So that 300 pages is probably going to be, I don't know.
There will be some additional sheets. It might get up low 400s, I'll say, but those are in progress. There's a lot of coordination stuff on those individual sheets that still has to be done to bring those up to CD level for bidding.
I think there's,
We're just glad it's not the budget.
So before we get there, I don't know if we have anything broken out here as a add alternate. And by that I mean, are there any chunks of the project that could be just nicely, say this thing comes in way over budget, it's like, well, I'm not going to say, but you know, where it could go here, I mean, we're talking about years from now. I think, just to be prudent about it might be, is there a spot that I do this, you do this, you know, it's like, on the drawings where we can just slice and dice and say, okay, our budget is this and this, and we can't build the whole thing we want to build now because the bids have come in, we'll just chop that chunk off. Now, just for everybody in the room here, you can't go back and rebid a project, that'll be a nightmare. But in preparing the drawings ahead of time, there might be a certain way that you can organize the drawings so that something is broken out and is easily biddable as what's called an add alternate to the main project. That way, and I think legally as well from a bidding point of view, when all these bids come in, the base bid is for what you know you can definitely get done. And then should the budgeting and the bidding work well in your favor and you feel comfortable enough, you can take the add alternate. But that has to be done now, up front.
You're correct. And it's typically, from a value standpoint, it's typically better to have add alternates than deducts. We tend to see better numbers in regard to that. We've had some preliminary discussions on some of that. I think some of that we'd still have to vet out, I think a little bit more, but I think it's a good suggestion if that's something we need to look at. I know Anthony's team has already started to talk about that. Is there some areas, and asking the design team if there's some areas where we think we could create add alternates. I don't want to get into specifics on that yet, but but that's a good point. And if that's the direction we think we need to go, we can address that.
not to, add alternates is a great strategy also. And then in general, we call it value engineering, which is keeping an eye on these plans as they develop over the next few months, and given our input and frankly input from some of our subcontractors, if we can lean on them a little bit to get suggestions to the designers and engineers of, you know, potentially better ways, a better mousetrap, if you will, for the same or less dollars. So that's always an ongoing process in our industry and what, you know, the services we provide.
And a lot of times you might see those in some of the systems. I'm sorry. And a lot of times you might see those in some of the MEP systems, right? There's certain scenarios that we could create with mechanical systems and controls and things like that, where we could get some add alternates in.
Anything else?
So the biggest timeline right now is the drawings are set to be complete July 22nd. Get them out the bid shortly thereafter. The intentions about that third week of August is the Buildings and Grounds Committee will review the bids as they come in for bid opening. And then realistically, we will be asking for a special meeting at the end of August for the county board to review all the bids that came in. The reason why we're bringing that forward is we know we won't have the bids enough time to approve at the August county board meeting, second Tuesday of the month, just how it falls this year. The other thing though is we're running against time. Obviously, just like a lot of things. And so if we wait till the September county board meeting, we slow down the construction schedule and contracting, and partially so we can get shovels in the ground before we hit more winter conditions. We're trying to avoid those costs. We're trying to avoid an additional 2% for another quarter. Those are the costs that we're also trying to avoid too going forward. So, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much thought's been given in how are we going to run the government while this is taking place, and where people are going to park, where's all the contractors going to be? How is that all going to work? Is that in planning or?
Yeah. So a lot of planning, right? And you basically got to look at breaking this building down into three components: admin, legislative functions, judicial functions, sheriff operations, including jail. Especially two of those, we really don't have, we can't just go down the street and rent a space, meaning judicial offices and especially jail operations. It's not an easy rentable space in the community, right? But what we have done, as we've looked at the additions going on, when those will be renovated, is starting to lay out plans with staff of phasing and where folks will move. We're hoping 2 moves for most office staffs, and then they're home. But we think we can fit most of it with the initial preliminary planning. We can keep most staff on site, not in their existing offices, but in a spot so they can continue operations here. From a courts perspective, as we look at the phasing plan to that, the 2 things that are done first, 3 things done first related to the courts is the whole new clerk of court office is put up right away. If you look at the traffic flow down the main flow of the courthouse, a significant amount of court traffic starts and ends at the clerk of court office. So if we can get that traffic in that front end, right off security, we can limit the amount of traffic that keeps going down when we have construction going on. One of the hearing rooms will also be constructed immediately. So not only to meet modern day standards for hearing rooms, but what that does do is allow judges to also use those rooms from a security standpoint. So we can take one courtroom offline at a time. And we'll also be the very first courtroom that will go offline will be that larger ceremonial courtroom, just because that's going to be much more extensive work that has to take place. From the sheriff's perspective, we're going to be looking at some like temporary walls to seal off areas, some security area that can safely work on. Specifically, we'll look at the new cells that are being built that are in visitor centers right now as an example. Getting the addition done that we can full example where the patrol division is going, probably move the detective division there first, and then in lower emergency management, get their spaces reconfigured and then move them back. So those are some of the planning phases that we're working through right now.
A lot of the plan is contingent on the 3 additions getting built first, providing like flex space for existing people to move in there temporarily, then while we remodel their space and then move them back.
So an example is like MIS will be the very last move. Sorry, John. But because they will have that space at the lower level that we can flex around for multiple departments for a time frame.
And then one last piece with that, it's the physical moving is one thing, but we've got a single mechanical system running throughout the whole facility. We're actually having meetings Wednesday with Mark and Anthony's team and the engineers to start talking about how we phase the systems and keep them up and operational, and how that's going to work to keep this place housed while taking down that one mechanical system or the MEP systems throughout the whole facility. So that's coming yet.
And it's kind of building on it in that budget too is a level of temporary heat and air conditioners built in there too, just in case certain sections can't be put in line right away. We kind of plan the budget for that just in case too.
Unless you'd all like to move back to the fairgrounds in the summer for meetings.
Try and get air out there. Try and get air out there.
John, Supervisor Kennard.
Oh, yes, thank you. With this inflation graphs, I guess doesn't to me look like it's sustainable. At some point, you're gonna have the camel and you're gonna break his back, and the whole world's gonna come tumbling down. I guess I'm a surveyor. I've already got numbers of projects where they've downsized or totally didn't even do them.
You would think so. At some point in time, the increased prices would have some people maybe rethink what they're doing. But there's so much money out there, frankly, in the private sector and the public sector through the PPP loans and through ARPA and whatnot, and there's pent up demand from people who were gun shy to do it for the last 2 years, where you may be right. I'm hoping we see a little bit of a slowdown, not too much of a slowdown, but yeah, I think eventually it's got to stop or slow down. I mean, it can't go on continued.
But do you see it regressing?
No.
The only time we've seen deflation was like 2009, 2010. So I certainly hope we don't get to that point, but I do think you're going to at least see it start to plateau. Construction inflation historically runs about 3.5%, which typical consumer inflation runs about 2.1. So construction does tend to outrun typical inflation in general, but yeah, eventually here I think you're going to have to see it slow down.
So what you might see is it might be at this rate, but then plateau. But we typically historically don't see it drop back down to, I'll say, 2020. It's not going to go there. Typically it stays at that plateau and then goes up from there in a couple of years.
I'm gone after today, so I can kind of stick my. foot in the mud a
Supervisor
little bit.
Nealon?
If you think about the cost of construction coming down, the only thing that's going to drive that is interest rates going up. So then we're borrowing at a higher rate to offset the lower cost. So what comes in goes out, if you know what I mean.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. With that information out in front of you, our possible action tonight is to vote for or against this final design plan, and it's or the update of the final design plan. Do I have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
And it's a second by Supervisor Schultz. Is that okay? Any discussion? Any further questions that just came to mind? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Supervisor Herbst? Supervisor Jones? Supervisor David? Supervisor Payne?
Yes.
Supervisor Roberts?
Yes.
27 yes, 2 no, and 1 absent.
And it passes. Thank you very much, folks. Which takes us to public comment of a general nature. Mr. Schultz.
I'm going to try to keep this under an hour.
3 minutes.
Just kidding. I can't keep it under an hour. I am just completing my 12 years on this county board. And early on, actually, I heard how old I am. I'm older than dirt, apparently. And one of my memories from when I first joined, many of you know, I was a soccer coach at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater for 3 years. You know what soccer is, right, Steve? That's the real football. And I joined this board, and I met one of those years. We played in Watertown at Maranatha Baptist College. And one of the boys, one of the young men on that team was, maybe you've heard of, a guy by the name of Dwayne Morris. Well, when I joined this board, I had a conversation with this gentleman with gray hair, only to find out that it's the same Dwayne Morris who played at Maranatha Baptist College when I was coaching. So I guess I am older than dirt. You are correct. I did want to make some comments. There are 2 issues when I joined this board early that I think are very important for us to remember. One of them was an addition to Dorothy Carnes Park. And the reason that's important to remember is we need to remember that we are situated between Dane County and Madison, Waukesha County and Milwaukee County. And so our nature areas, our parks, are an important part of our economy, drawing people from urban areas. I think we do a very good job of maintaining them, and I think we really should. The other issue that was big when I joined the board was moving the highway shop. And there were different groups in this board that dragged that out a long time. The highway shop was deteriorating. We need to understand, and we did it right. We built a very good highway shop. We did it right the first time. That's what we're looking at with the sheriffs and with the addition of the courthouse, doing it right the first time. Because in the long run, that is less expensive than if you spend the money up front than if you don't do it right and then later have to. So I think those were very important issues. I had made some notes, but I'm trying to rush through this because he tells me I've only got 3 minutes. As some of you know, at one point, I was criticized for not thinking the way I was expected to think. And I think things have gotten better, frankly, on this board, but I think that's very important. I'm worried about the future of this nation. Because when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, whatever it is, we have developed an attitude of, if you don't think the same way I do, you're stupid. And like I said, I think it's gotten better on this board. And I think that's something that we need to focus on. There needs to be room on this board for different opinions. And somebody is not dumb because they think differently. And that's very, very important. I think.
Your time's up, Mr. Schultz.
Okay, well, I'm almost done. So, the reason I'm continuing this is the one thing I really wanted to do is compliment the staff here in the Jefferson County Courthouse. I was going to start naming names, and then I realized there were so many of them that I couldn't do that. I didn't have time to do that. So we are lucky. The citizens of this county need to know that they are lucky with the people who are serving them. I'm not naming names with one exception. I talked to a man last month and complimented him and told him that, in my opinion, one of the most important things, or one of the best things that we did as a county board, was to hire Ben Waymeyer as county administrator. He does a very good job. And I wanted to publicly say to you, Ben, thank you for all that you have done. Thank you. It's been a pleasure serving. And the last word I want to tell you is, I'm going to be watching you.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, Mr. Schultz, you have 2 Hall of Fame football coaches here, so you're going to have to get past before you leave. And under any more general comment? Otherwise, announcements. Mr. Waymeyer.
Since you all love listening to me talk tonight already. So a couple quick things. Just a reminder, we're asking for all tablets we turn in tonight. If you just want to set them right up here at the press table when you leave, we'll take care of wrapping everything up, but turn in there. Outgoing county board members, do you want to take your nameplates? Please do. As a little memory going forward. As a reminder, next week, Tuesday, we do have orientation that starts at 6. 6 to 6:30 will kind of be informal. 6:30 will be introductions, and 7 o'clock the programming will start. So welcoming back county board members, plus those who are running for office, please come. We do have 2 committee meetings right before that. One at 4 o'clock, HR, and Buildings and Grounds at 5 o'clock. So a few of you are trying to make sure we get every last moment of your time before you're officially out of office. And then the last thing I want to quick talk about is obviously a quick update on avian flu. So a couple quick items on here. So first of all, for information, if you go to our county website and you click on the chicken, you will see the main DATCAP website that comes up. And the reason why this is important are a couple main things. So every day when there's a significant communication or press release coming from DATCAP, and they're the ones who are providing the information, it is listed here by day. Another key document, and we asked them to highlight, and it looks like they did do that, is the frequently asked questions. So if you have questions, you have constituents asking questions, please try to refer them to this page as a source of information. And then finally, in the lower right-hand corner, they have set up a avian influenza response line. Last week they had some technical difficulties. We have been advised it is up and operational, but if you have constituents who have issues, please let us know. We have been asked to funnel all our questions via emergency management up to the state agencies. So if you have questions, please let us know. We'll get them funneled up and get them answered the best we can, and as timely as we can, which is not always most timely in our opinion. Couple other quick updates. Last week, the flock has officially been fully depopulated. As most of you have seen in the news, it's a lot of birds. So it's going to take some time to haul them off from the barn to where they're composting right now. We're expecting a few more weeks of truck traffic, and then once the last chicken is put in place, we got about 30 plus days of composting before it's officially good to go. The Sheriff's Department and others are trying to work on truck traffic. We have designated routes. If they're off those routes, we're supposed to be notified. We have requested additional resources from Wisconsin State Patrol to include weight enforcement as well, because we had reports of trucks being overweight. The initial test case that were pulled over met weight requirements as best as we can tell, but we're going to continue to enforce that going forward. So best source of information to funnel through right now is I try to go to this website, please. But obviously, Donna Holcomb, the sheriff, and I are also involved. And if we can't answer, which might be tough, we will get the information as best we can from state agencies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrator Waymeyer prompted this thought. Over the weekend, I was talking to some residents, and one was familiar with the chicken problem in the disposal, and had called Donna Hogan in emergency management, and had gotten such a prompt and complete reply to his questions that he was very impressed, he said, with Donna Hogan's performance. So I wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. See no more business to come in front of the board. I want to thank all you outgoing supervisors for all your service all these years. I really appreciate that. Mr. Schultz, you had a comment?
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to.
And thank you all. And just a reminder that the next meeting is until April 19th, and it starts at 4 o'clock for those of you that are returning. So mark your calendars. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Jago. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Please bring your tablets up.
Probably was.
I know.
It wasn't.
I'm such a sensitive.
Yeah, you're like looking at me like. Eccentric places. I mean,
The only time I've ever been here was we had a committee meeting in the beginning of COVID. Started yelling at my face.
I feel something.
Everybody was saying, and they were spitting as they were speaking. No.
No, I just wanted to turn around and see what you were saying.
So you realize.
You're in the back.